All right, 2008 Toyota Sienna, front wheel drive, 184,000 miles. It's been determined that my axle is bent. Don't ask me how it got bent, I have no idea. But it's been checked out by two different mechanics. They can't find anything wrong with the rear end. My camber was way off. I don't know if it was called negative or positive camber, but basically the top of the tire was in too far and the bottom was out, so I had to put an alignment shim in there. It was off by over a degree, so this is a 1 degree shim. I think it's the biggest you can get, not sure, but you can see how it's thin on that side and you turn it around and it's thick on the other side. So I've already got a shim in there and it corrected the problem pretty much. Come on, focus. But now my toe is off a little bit. In fact, you can probably see the shim right there, that green part. Okay, so that's the shim. It's really close, but it's not perfect. So here's my last alignment. You can see the toe is off a little bit. The camber is correct now, which is good, because that was a bad part. The insides of the tires were wearing very bad quickly. So anyways, we're going to pull the rotor off. You know, pull the caliper, pull the rotor, and then pull the bearing out. The shim goes behind the bearing. So let's get to that. Okay, so I got the caliper pulled off, got it hanging here by a bungee cord. Next thing you're going to have to do is pull this hub assembly off. And there are 4. I've already got them off, but back in here, there's 1, there's another one, 2, and there's another one over here, 3, and then 4. So what I did, 14 millimeter deep dish with a breaker bar, and I didn't have any trouble. Now, if you live in the Rust Belt or where they use salt on the roads, you could have problems with this whole operation. I was told. I haven't had any problems myself, but you could potentially have problems because stuff is rusted together. So once you get this loose, mine's already loose, make sure you pull the wheel speed sensor off the back. It's got a clip. I don't remember how the clip works. I always have trouble with those clips. But anyways, let me figure it out. We're going to pull that clip off, and this whole assembly is going to pull forward. You won't be able to pull it out all the way and lay it on the ground or anything like that, because you still have brake lines attached. So anyways, you will be able to pull it off of the bolts and to where you can get that bearing and what do they call it, that spacer, that alignment shim. Alright, so I'm going to try to pull that assembly out of there. I don't remember if I disconnected a brake line before or not. Bearing. So I'm going to replace the bearing while I'm in there, because I bought this one off eBay. It was cheap, but it has got a little play in it already, and it's only been in there. It's been in there about a year. You can see all the rust on it already. I've got a new NSK bearing, which my mechanic told me he thinks NSK is the OEM brand that they use, so that's why I went with it. Okay, so the bearing is out. This will come out. You gotta push your studs in. Okay. Well, there you go. It's out. There's your alignment shim. This is what it rests up against, the inside of this, I don't know what it's called, hub assembly. Just make sure that your contact points are all clean. So wherever that shim's going, or alignment shim, make sure, behind it is all clean. Might have to use a wire brush, clean it up. Make sure it's nice and smooth, because you don't want any little rocks or rust, or that's going to throw your whole alignment off. So you make sure it's nice and smooth. Clean it up real good. Okay, so I'm going to pull that one out, cut the new one, and put everything back together. Let's see if we can do that. Okay, so here's what comes with your alignment shims. You're going to have a chart which you're supposed to be able to figure out where to notch your shim. Gives you numbers. You align those numbers up with this template. Just make sure you're looking at the right passenger side rear, driver side rear, used with green shim. Just make sure you're looking at the right template. The easiest way to do this is, if you have it at the alignment shop and they tell you, oh, your rear end is bent or whatever, and we can't alignment, you're going to have to put a shim in. They can tell you exactly what shim you need with their alignment machine and where to notch it. I did not know this. I did this by trial and error at first, until I took it in there and they showed me on the machine that they've got a screen that'll tell them what shim you need to use and where to notch it. So that's the easiest way to do it. Just ask them. They're not going to tell you unless you ask them. So the easiest way to notch these things, use a really thin blade. So I got this X-Acto knife, or whatever you want to call it. You start at the end. Just take a little bite at a time. Don't try to cut the whole thing, because it will split. And if it splits, you can still use it. When I mean split, I mean crack. See, this one's cracked. I cracked this one. You can still use it like that. You don't necessarily want to, but you can. So if you take a little bite at a time and just notch it down, these things are pretty tough and pretty strong, especially if you're trying to notch out these thick parts. You have to push pretty hard. Put it on a flat surface, concrete floor, something nice and flat, because you have to use some force to cut these. All right, let me see if I can figure out where to notch this thing. All right, so I got this is how I mark it, with just with a Sharpie. Figure out where you need to notch it. You're marking it on the lines. See the lines? So that's where your studs are going to fit through. That's where you're going to mount it. But like I said, just take a little bite at a time, right in the groove. They're not easy to cut. You can try a pair of snips, but just make sure there's got a skinny blade on them, or a utility knife or something. But this is what I found works the best. It's going to take a little time, and this is the skinny one, so you can imagine how hard the thick end is. This isn't the best utility, or and you can look on the back, you can see where I've already scored it. And then there, see? just like that. It snapped all the way through right there. Well, luckily these things are relatively inexpensive. You can get them. Oh, I think I paid $7 for this. So anyways, be careful. That's all I can say. Continue cutting. Get it notched out. You can still use it like that. You can even, if you want to put some super glue on there or something, it should stick. Okay, so I got my alignment shim all cut and glued. But next thing you want to do is make sure that your surfaces are all going to be clean. You know, where the shim is going. So the shim's going to be resting up against here. I don't know what this thing is called. But just clean all these surfaces. You know, your bearings going to go in here. So try to clean where your bearing's going to be sitting and where your alignment shim is going to be sitting. Here's the inside. You can see the marks where the shim was sitting. So you know, just spray with brake cleaner or whatever and make sure it's all clean, because you know, rust, all these things can throw off your alignment. So clean it up real good and then put it back together. So I took off this brake line holder right there. Right there. There's the spring brake line. Gives you a little more room. A little more wiggle room. See, right now the caliper's kind of holding me back a little bit, but you'll have enough room just by pulling it back like that to work in there. Alright, so because of the bolt pattern, there's no way you can put this thing in wrong. It'll only fit one way. I guess you could put it in backwards, but you know, the flat surface goes against the inside of the car. So you can see, because of the bolt pattern, the top bolts are wider than the bottom bolts. It only goes on there one way. So it's going to go on just like that. Can't do it with one hand, so let's get it in there. Okay, so there it is. Make sure it's all the way against the back. Hold this flange out with your studs on it. Push it in. Push that back. I clean the inside of this out with a wire brush and clean the surface behind the alignment shim with brake cleaner. And I cleaned the inside of that with brake cleaner and rubbed it down. It should be good. So now I'll just put it back together. Okay, so the spacer's in there. There it is. What I ended up doing, I ended up disconnecting this other brake line here. This one and that one. That'll give you a lot more play, a lot more room. You're going to have to hold your hand on the back of this bracket there that has 4 studs on it and try to push everything back together. You're going to have to pull it out, pull this out, push it in. Then your bearing is going to go right in there. It only goes one way. You know, the wider bolts, you can't put it in wrong. Right there, just like that. Put the bolts, put the nuts on there, tighten them up, and you should be all set. Take it to the alignment machine and see where you're at. Hopefully you're good. What I did was I got 3-year alignment, unlimited alignments. So I've taken it in there 3 times over the last year. So anyways, good luck. If you can take your if you can do a brake job, you can do this job. Takes me about, since I've done it multiple times, takes me about 45 minutes. Your first time, hour and a half. Hopefully you won't have anything rusted or corroded. That'll give you problems.